Robert Levine, author of the new controversial book about the internet and culture, Free Ride, how the internet is destroying the culture business and how the culture business can fight back. Robert, I don't want to talk about destruction. I want to talk about fighting back. I want to talk about a positive message of what the culture business now can do to rebuild itself in the 21st century. So no blaming Google, no blaming Larry Lessig. What needs to happen?
Well, I think media companies need to take back pricing power and realize the pricing power that they have. I mean, one of the false narratives was that things are too expensive, people won't pay this, people won't pay that. There's not a lot of evidence to support that. As an example, when iTunes went to varied pricing, the most expensive tracks were $129. They sold fewer tracks, they made more money. That was great for media companies. When the New York Times started charging for content, they made more money. I think believing that you have no power to charge for things leads you to make very poor decisions.
But what does that mean in terms of pricing? Give me some concrete examples.
Well,
Use the example of your book, for example. What needs to change to make it easier for you as an author to make a living in the 21st, in the digital 21st century?
Well, I think that as a creator, I would like to have, and to make money, I would certainly want to have more control over pricing. The best way to maximize revenue is to start the price of the book very high and gradually lower it so you reach the maximum number of buyers at each pricing level.
But that already exists, right? You have a hardback and then a softback.
That exists in a very primitive form. It did for a long time. When Amazon put a lot of pricing pressure on books, that all the Kindle books had to be $10, I think that was a really bad thing. The publishers stopped it. I think that was a really good thing. I think that the amount of pirate books out there, and this is a small problem, but it's starting to get bigger quickly, that also puts a lot of downward price pressure. You feel like if you're not offering something for free, you're missing out.
Okay, well, we know there are problems with piracy. We know that the free culture movement isn't going to go away. But what are some of the positive examples of media companies that are figuring this out? What is your view, for example, of Netflix, of the Netflix and Spotify models?
I think Spotify is a really good model. I don't know if the pricing is realistic. If you look at some of the royalties artists are getting, I'm not sure if it's enough money, but I like the model. Same with Netflix. I think the model of everything you can watch for a flat fee is a great model. As a matter of fact, we've had it for over 20 years. We call it cable television. That's the same thing. It's all the content you can watch for a certain fee. The fact that Netflix is priced so much lower than cable suggests that they may have to raise prices in order to get the same quality of content.
But even the cable industry needs to go a la carte, doesn't it?
I think so. I think the market will take care of that, though.
And you're an ex-Billboard reporter, so you know the music business very well.
Correct.
What startup businesses outside Spotify in the music business are promising? What about some of these companies that are rebuilding the commercial relationship between artist and audience?
I think some of those are interesting. I think that a lot of them are interesting. You know, Bandcamp is okay. I think Topspin is really interesting. But I think that what artists need more than tools on how to sell things is someone to invest. Like if you're a beginning artist and you want to sell T-shirts, you have a way to sell T-shirts, but no one's going to buy your T-shirt until you have a following. How do you build a following without funding? That's a much bigger problem. Who's going to work on that? If someone works on that, Topspin could be a very valuable tool. I think Kickstarter is interesting, but I'm not sure if it can scale. I'm actually pessimistic about whether it can scale.
What about the people who argue that the old book or the movie or the record or the CD is the giveaway, and that the money is to be made in live now, in speeches or in gigs? What's your reaction to that? Is that a viable model for a 21st century entertainment economy?
I don't think it's a viable model for an economy. I think it's a very viable model for some performers. Radiohead certainly did very well with that. You know, a band like U2 makes a lot of money on the road compared to the albums they sell. For books, I have a hard time imagining myself making that much money on the road
Well, maybe you
speaking
need to improve your speaking skills.
or get better looking. But I think the other thing
Well,
is
you
that,
seem all right if you
oh, thank
shaved
you,
off your
Andrew.
beard.
I think one of the problems is that, how much money could I make without speaking to companies I cover, which represents a serious conflict of interest?
So you're saying that many of these artists are kind of inevitably compromised by the live speaking thing?
I think journalists can be. I don't know about artists. I think journalists can be. If I had, I was offered a couple speaking opportunities for money by companies I cover. If I had taken those opportunities and you found out that I had received $20,000 from Universal Records and Warner Music, I have not. If you found out that I had, would you want to read the book, or you would say, hey, this is a bunch of nonsense. This guy's getting paid by these people?
Well, I wouldn't have a problem if it was after you'd written the book.
Okay. I think a lot of people might, because I think you would write it with that payoff in mind, or it would be hard not to write with that payoff in mind.
So you're saying that in our increasingly transparent world, it's harder and harder to actually do paid content if you're in nonfiction?
I think so. And look, I think there's room for both models. I mean, some nonfiction authors are very charismatic. They're going to do very well as speakers. Others aren't. I love living in a world where some people can make a lot of money speaking. I don't think I want to live in a world where it's impossible to write nonfiction unless you can make money speaking.
Well, let's go beyond the business models. When you talk about how the culture business can fight back, do you think this needs to be done in Washington, D.C., with legislation like Protect IP?
Certainly. I think that's part of it, too. There are things I like about Protect IP. There are things I'm not wild about, but I think you need to have some level of copyright enforcement. And what disturbs me about Protect IP is that the people who don't like the bill are not saying, we don't like this method of copyright enforcement, we prefer this one. They're saying, we don't like this bill, we'd prefer no enforcement at all. That's not really a valid answer. And it's not going to get us closer to a better solution. I would hate to let the content business decide the future of the internet, but I would hate to let Google and some other technology companies block any kind of law enforcement at all. Those both seem like bad futures. This might sound idealistic, but I think we all deserve better.
I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago, Robert, and the French have a very different attitude to this, to the Americans. Do you favor the European model of more aggressive legislation?
Yes, I do. I think that there's things about Adobe I'm not wild about. I think that slowing internet access as a penalty is a much better penalty than cutting it off. And I think that you need to be sure that when you have these kind of regulations, you allow for an appeal process. But I think the principle is a good one.
What, if 3 strikes, you're out?
Some number of strikes, yes. With an appeal process, I think is a good idea.
And you would favor that kind of solution in the U.S. to people who continually steal online?
I would much rather, that would be my last choice. My first choice would be going after commercial scale pirates in an aggressive way. When you think about what we've done to enforce copyright, the idea of suing or opposing penalties on a lot of users does not sit very well with me. It seems unfair. It looks terrible. There's always a debate about how much these people know what they're doing is wrong, and it's inefficient.
So that's why you like Protect IP, that it goes after the large pirate companies rather than individuals.
Yeah. And now you look at the Pirate Bay, the guys behind the Pirate Bay are facing jail time. I think that's great. I think jail is where they belong. I mean, based on my understanding of the issue, jail is where they belong.
Finally, Robert, the market or legislation when it comes to saving the entertainment industry, one or the other?
Definitely the market. I think you need legislation to set some boundaries for the market so the market can work, but definitely the market is where this is going.
Well, Robert, I want to thank you for some very valuable free entertainment on the free network, TechCrunchTV.com.
Thank you so much.